What if the most powerful message from heaven was entrusted not to a scholar, a priest, or a queen, but to a sickly girl living in a former prison, forgotten by the world? What if miracles began not with thunder, but with a quiet whisper heard only in the silence of poverty, where the world sees nothing, yet God begins something extraordinary? This is not a tale of greatness found in glory, but of grace found in hiddenness. This is the story of Saint Bernadette Soubirous. Chapter 1. A Saint is Born. In the foothills of the Pyrenees, tucked within the quiet town of Lourdes, a child was born on the 7th of January 1844. Her name was Bernadette Soubirous, though most would simply call her Bernadette. Her birth brought no fanfare, no signs, no predictions of sainthood, just a weak cry in a cold, damp room that once served as a jail cell. Her family, devastated by poverty, had nowhere else to go, so they lived in Le Cachot, the dungeon, a place as bleak as its name suggested. Bernadette was the eldest of 9 children, though not all would survive childhood. Her father, François, was a miller by trade, but a collapsing economy and bad luck had stolen even that modest livelihood. Her mother, Louise, took in laundry to put bread on the table, but often there wasn't enough bread, and sometimes not even a table. Their life was a daily struggle, not for comfort, but for survival. There were no luxuries, only the barest necessities, and even those were uncertain. Physically, Bernadette was frail. She suffered from chronic asthma and had survived a cholera outbreak that left her weak and constantly ill. At school, she struggled to keep up. She could barely read, couldn't write, and hadn't yet made her first communion. Among her peers, she was seen as the slow, sickly girl from the prison house. She was overlooked, dismissed, invisible in every way that the world considers valuable. But in the silence of her obscurity, something deeper was forming. Bernadette may have lacked education, but her heart was rich in faith. She clung to her rosary like a lifeline and spoke to the Virgin Mary in the same way a child speaks to her mother, naturally, trustingly. She didn't quote scripture or impress with prayers. She simply believed. In the poverty of her life, her soul grew spacious, a quiet chamber prepared for grace. While the town bustled with markets, gossip, and the noise of daily life, Bernadette walked through it like a shadow. Yet heaven had its eyes on her, not because she was strong or wise or worthy, but precisely because she was none of those things. God had chosen before and would choose again what the world ignores to reveal what truly matters. No one in Lourdes, not her parents, not her teachers, not even Bernadette herself, could have guessed what was coming. The child who helped gather bones and firewood to heat a room without windows was being shaped by divine hands. Her lungs struggled to breathe, her mind struggled to learn, but her spirit was ready to listen. Saints are not born in light. They are born in silence, in struggle, in hidden places where only God is watching. From the darkness of Le Cachot, a light would soon shine, not loud, not proud, but pure. A saint was born, and the world, in time, would come to see. Chapter 2. The Lady in the Light. On the morning of the 11th of February 1858, Bernadette set out with her younger sister and a friend to gather firewood. The winter air was sharp, and her asthma slowed her steps. As the others crossed a canal near the rocky grotto of Massabielle, Bernadette paused to catch her breath. That's when she heard a sound like a sudden rush of wind, yet the trees did not move. She turned toward the grotto, and what she saw would change her life forever. Bathed in a golden light stood a lady, luminous, silent, and unlike anyone Bernadette had ever seen. She wore a white robe that shimmered like morning frost, a blue sash at her waist, and a rosary dangling from her right arm. Golden roses adorned her bare feet. The lady smiled gently, but said nothing. Bernadette, though frightened, felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She instinctively reached for her own rosary and knelt on the damp ground to pray. As she recited the familiar words of the Hail Mary, she noticed something miraculous. The lady moved her fingers along the beads of her own rosary in perfect rhythm with Bernadette. Though she remained completely silent, her presence seemed to deepen the prayer, as if heaven itself was responding. When the prayer ended, the lady smiled once more, then slowly disappeared. The light faded, and Bernadette was left in stunned silence, unsure if anyone would believe her. That evening, she hesitantly told her sister what had happened. Word spread quickly through the household and soon reached her parents. Her mother, Louise, dismissed it as imagination or perhaps even something dangerous. She firmly forbade Bernadette from returning to the grotto, but the image of the lady remained etched in the girl's heart. Bernadette knew what she had seen, and something within her stirred with purpose. 3 days later, on February 14, Bernadette received reluctant permission to return. This time, she brought holy water with her, just in case the vision was a trick of the devil. Once again, as she began to pray the rosary, the lady appeared. Bernadette sprinkled the water toward her and said, "If you come from God, stay. If not, go away." The lady smiled even more tenderly and nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the girl's discernment. The encounter lasted several minutes, with Bernadette falling into deep prayer, her face glowing with a peace beyond words. Those who accompanied her were stunned at the transformation they witnessed. When the vision ended, she was left exhausted, but filled with serenity. She had not imagined it. The lady was real, and she had returned. Though no words had yet been spoken, Bernadette felt it in her soul. She was being called, not by force, not with commands, but by a quiet and irresistible love, a love that asked nothing aloud, yet stirred everything within her. It was a summons that needed no explanation, only surrender. The lady's gaze, full of tenderness and mystery, spoke to something deeper than thought. Chapter 3. A promise beyond this world. From the very beginning, there was something mysterious and solemn about the lady's presence. On Bernadette's third visit to the grotto, the lady finally spoke. Her voice was soft, like wind through leaves, but firm with a purpose not of this world. "Would you do me the favor," she asked, "of coming here for 15 days? Bernadette nodded without hesitation. In her young heart, there was no room for doubt, only wonder and an instinctive trust. But the lady's next words were more puzzling. "I do not promise to make you happy in this world," she said, "but in the next." They were not words a child would normally understand, but something in them rang true. Life had never been easy for Bernadette. She knew the sharp ache of hunger and the cold breath of poverty. Still, to hear it confirmed that suffering would continue and to accept it with peace, this marked the beginning of something holy. Each day, Bernadette returned to the grotto as promised. Word spread quickly throughout Lourdes. By the 5th day, crowds had begun to gather, some curious, others skeptical, a few prayerful. Bernadette, however, remained unaffected by the attention. Her eyes, whenever she entered that sacred place, seemed to leave the world behind. While she knelt and prayed, her face glowed with a peace no one could explain, her gaze fixed on something only she could see. The lady's messages were simple, yet powerful. "Penance," she said. "Pray for sinners." In a world increasingly drawn to material comfort and scientific pride, these words felt old-fashioned or even offensive. But they rang like church bells to those whose hearts still sought God. Through this poor, uneducated girl, heaven was calling the world back to humility, back to prayer, back to mercy. Not everyone approved. Some townspeople accused Bernadette of lying or seeking attention. Others said she was imagining things. Her mother feared the growing controversy and begged her to stop. Priests kept their distance, wary of hysteria or deception. And yet, Bernadette returned each day quietly, humbly, without complaint. She never argued or defended herself. She simply obeyed, moved by a certainty that defied logic. As the days passed, the crowds grew larger, sometimes in the hundreds. Yet even as all eyes were on her, Bernadette seemed to vanish into something greater. During her ecstasies, she no longer looked like the frail, coughing girl from Le Cachot. Her face became serene, almost luminous, a visible sign of an invisible grace. People who came to mock often left in silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The promise the lady gave Bernadette was not for comfort or approval. It was not for wealth or healing or recognition. It was a promise anchored in eternity, one that required suffering, misunderstanding, and surrender. And Bernadette, though only a child, said yes. Each day she walked to the grotto, she walked further away from the world and closer to the heart of God. Chapter 4. The Spring Beneath the Dust. By February 25, the crowd at Massabielle had grown. What began as whispers around Lourdes had become a movement, some faithful, some curious, some mocking. Bernadette, however, remained unchanged. She came as she always had, simple, quiet, and obedient. That morning, kneeling in prayer, she again saw the lady. But this time, the lady gave her a strange instruction, one that would test the girl's humility in front of a watching world. "Go drink from the spring," the lady said, "and wash in it." Bernadette looked around, confused. There was no spring, only dirt, stones, and dried-up earth at the base of the grotto. But she did not hesitate. Slowly, she crawled on her knees to the far end of the cave and began to dig with her bare hands. Mud caked her fingers. The crowd murmured in confusion, some laughed, others looked away in discomfort. As she dug, muddy water began to seep up between her fingers. She cupped it in her hand and awkwardly brought it to her lips. It was bitter, nearly undrinkable, but she obeyed. She splashed it on her face, as instructed. Her dress was now soiled, her hair tangled, and her appearance wild. To those watching, the scene made no sense. "She's gone mad," someone whispered, but Bernadette paid no attention to the noise around her. Her eyes remained fixed on something no one else could see. That same day, the trickle of water continued to flow from the spot she had dug, and the next day, it flowed stronger. Within days, it had become a steady stream, running clean and cold. People began to collect it in jars, bottles, even their bare hands. And then came the stories of healing, of impossible recoveries, of pain lifted and sight restored. The muddy hole Bernadette uncovered had become a source of wonder. The first recorded healing came quickly. A woman with a paralyzed arm dipped it in the spring and regained full movement. Doctors were baffled. Skeptics began to question their doubts. But when asked about it, Bernadette gave no speech, claimed no credit. She simply said, "I only did what the lady told me. That was all. No glory, no pride, just obedience." Authorities, meanwhile, grew uneasy. This quiet girl was attracting attention from across the region. Pilgrims, reporters, and even government officials descended upon the grotto. But Bernadette remained the same, kneeling, praying, following. She never tried to explain the miracles, nor did she seek to understand them. Her task was not to explain the mystery, but to be faithful within it. In the dust and mud of a forgotten grotto, a spring now flowed not just with water, but with grace. And at its heart stood a girl with no education, no wealth, and no voice of her own, except the one she had learned to follow. A spring had risen from the earth, but something greater had risen from obedience. Chapter 5. The Fire and the Silence. As the spring flowed and stories of healing spread, Bernadette's life began to change. What had once been quiet devotion now became public spectacle. Crowds grew larger, journalists arrived from Paris. Skeptics and scientists traveled to Lourdes, determined to expose what they believed must be deception. And with them came the officials, police, doctors, and government men in long coats who looked at Bernadette not with faith, but suspicion. To them, this girl had become a problem. She was summoned repeatedly for questioning. Police scribbled notes as they interrogated her with cold precision. Are you lying? Are you imagining it? Are your parents making you say these things? Bernadette answered them all with calm. She did not embellish or dramatize. Her story never changed. I saw a lady, she said. She asked me to come. I did what she told me. That was all. Simple, steady, consistent to a degree that unnerved even her harshest critics. Doctors came next. One by one, they examined her during her visions, trying to find proof of hysteria or mental illness. Dr. Dozus, a respected local physician and former skeptic, observed her carefully. He saw how, during her ecstasies, her body seemed to enter another realm, immune to distraction, unaware of the crowd, utterly at peace. One day, he performed a bold test. He held an open flame beneath her hand as she clutched a candle during prayer. The flame licked her fingers for over 10 minutes. She did not flinch, did not pull away. Her skin did not blister. Her pulse did not change. When the trance ended, she showed no sign of pain. The doctor was stunned. This is beyond reason, he admitted. Something is happening here, something we cannot explain. News of the candle miracle spread rapidly, drawing even more attention to the grotto. But Bernadette never reacted to the commotion. While the world debated around her, she remained rooted in silence and sincerity. She neither defended herself nor sought to convert anyone. When people praised her, she looked down. When they mocked her, she simply walked away. Her strength came not from argument or pride, but from a quiet place deep within. She had no interest in convincing anyone. Her mission was obedience, not persuasion. Still, the attention brought hardship to her family. Some accused the Soubirous household of exploiting Bernadette for fame or money, but they remained as poor as ever. Her father was even briefly jailed on false charges. Through it all, Bernadette stood firm. "The lady does not frighten me," she told one officer, "but men do." That sentence, spoken with calm innocence, revealed the depth of her courage. The fire did not burn her. The silence did not shake her. The trials did not break her. In a world craving signs, Bernadette became one not through grand words or acts, but by simply being faithful. And for the first time, the world began not just to watch, but to listen. Chapter 6. I am the Immaculate Conception. By late March, the mystery surrounding the lady had only deepened. People flocked to Lourdes in greater numbers, drawn by the healings and the presence they could not see. The question lingered in every heart and on every tongue. Who was this lady? Why had she come? Even Bernadette, despite seeing her 16 times, did not know her name. And the lady had not yet revealed it, only asked for prayer, penance, and return. On the 25th of March, 1858, the feast of the Annunciation, Bernadette woke before dawn with a quiet urgency. This would be her 16th visit to the grotto. Though the crowds were still asleep, she walked alone through the silent streets of Lourdes, the morning air cold and still. When she reached Massabielle and knelt to pray, the lady appeared, shining as always in peace and light. But this time, Bernadette carried a question in her heart, one given to her by her parish priest. At the request of Father Peramail, Bernadette had been instructed to ask the lady her name. The priest remained cautious, still unsure of the authenticity of the visions. If this truly was the Mother of God, he wanted confirmation, and in a way that left no doubt. Bernadette obeyed. She lifted her eyes toward the lady and asked humbly, "Would you be so kind as to tell me who you are?" The lady did not answer at once. She smiled, lifted her eyes toward heaven, and then slowly returned her gaze to Bernadette. Then she spoke, "I am the Immaculate Conception." The words hung in the air, reverent and glowing. Bernadette blinked. She had never heard that phrase before. She didn't understand it, couldn't explain it, but she knew it mattered. She repeated the words under her breath again and again, a child's way of remembering something sacred. Over and over, she whispered, "I am the Immaculate Conception," as she made her way back through the town toward the presbytery. Bursting into the room where Father Peramale sat, Bernadette declared, she said, "Que soy era Immaculada Conception." The priest froze. His eyes widened. He stared at the girl, this illiterate peasant child who could barely say her prayers correctly, and yet here she was, repeating with perfect clarity the precise title given to Mary in the dogma declared by Pope Pius IX only 4 years earlier. Father Peramale was shaken. Bernadette could not have invented such a term. She had no theological training, no access to church documents. The phrase was exact, unmistakable. It was the confirmation he had been waiting for, not from Bernadette, but from heaven itself. The church, so often slow and cautious, now had to reckon with something divine. That day became a turning point in the church's investigation. The voice of the Virgin had spoken through the most unlikely of messengers. Bernadette remained humble, unaware of the weight of her words. But the world would never be the same again. The silence had been broken, the name had been given, and heaven had left its mark. Chapter 7. Leaving Lourdes, walking into silence. After the final apparition and the lady's revelation, Bernadette's life changed forever. She had become known not just in Lourdes, but across France. People came in droves to see the girl of the grotto, hoping for a glimpse, a touch, a word. But Bernadette had no desire to remain in the public eye. The miracles, the attention, the voices around her, none of it belonged to her. Her mission, she believed, was over, and now she longed to live unknown. Religious congregations from around the country extended invitations. Some viewed her presence as a gift, others hoped for recognition. Bernadette, however, searched for something different. She was not looking for admiration or comfort, but for silence. After prayerful discernment, she chose the Sisters of Charity of Nevers, a congregation devoted to humble service and a hidden life. That was what she truly wanted to be, just another sister. In July 1866, she said farewell to Lourdes. Before departing, she returned to the grotto one final time. She knelt, prayed, and silently wept. A friend standing nearby heard her whisper, "I will never see her again." It was a moment of farewell not just to a place, but to the visible intimacy she had once shared with the Blessed Virgin. From now on, faith would replace vision and obedience would replace wonder. Upon arriving in Nevers, she entered the novitiate and received the name Sister Marie Bernard. From the start, her superiors treated her firmly. Fearing that the other sisters might revere her too highly, they assigned her the most menial tasks and rarely spoke of her past. She was asked to sweep floors, wash dishes, and carry heavy buckets of water. Her fragile health made even simple work difficult, but she accepted everything with docility and gratitude. The transition was not easy. The silence was deep, and the obscurity at times isolating. But Bernadette welcomed it. "I came here to hide," she told one sister, "to give myself to God, not to be admired." She rarely mentioned Lourdes. Even when asked, she spoke little. To her, those visions were not medals to display, but mysteries to guard in her heart. When visitors wrote asking for relics or spiritual favors, she often did not respond. Fame had never sat comfortably with her soul. In the convent, she found what she had long sought, a place where she could pray, suffer, and serve, quietly, freely, joyfully. The world had known her as a visionary. Now, she desired only to be a disciple. She had once seen Heaven's Queen with her own eyes radiant, alive, full of grace. But now, in the hush of Nevers, she was learning something just as great: to find God not in wonders, but in the silence of obedience, the smallness of daily tasks, and the hidden courage of love. Chapter 8. The Hidden Glory. As the years passed, Sister Marie Bernard became a silent pillar within the convent of Nevers. Though her body weakened steadily, her inner life deepened with quiet intensity. She never led retreats, never taught classes, never wrote a book. But in every hallway she walked, in every task she completed with love, she left behind a trace of grace. Her sainthood was not displayed, it was lived, tucked into the folds of daily routine. She rarely spoke of the apparitions. "My mission is over," she would say gently when asked about Lourdes. "Others can speak of it. I am here to pray." Her silence spoke volumes. Even her sisters began to sense something different, not in her words, but in her presence. She radiated peace, a kind of holiness that didn't draw attention, but quietly invited others to draw nearer to God. When young novices entered the community, they were often curious about the visionary in their midst. But what struck them most was not the history she carried, but the humility she embodied. She swept the same floors, folded the same laundry, endured the same rules. "All is grace," she once whispered to a younger sister who complained of fatigue. "Even the smallest work, if done with love, becomes prayer." Her responses to visitors and interviewers became quietly legendary. When asked why the Virgin chose her, she replied, "She found someone more ignorant than me, but I was more willing." To a bishop who asked whether the Blessed Mother had spoken in French or Latin, she answered calmly, "She spoke in the dialect of Barège. How else would I have understood her?" Her answers were not rehearsed, they were real, flowing from a life stripped of ego and full of truth. Bernadette feared one thing deeply: that people would forget the Virgin and glorify her instead. "If they make me a saint," she once said with alarm, "they will remove the Virgin's statue and put mine in her place. That would be a tragedy." Her longing was to remain unknown, so that the message she carried would shine more brightly than the messenger who bore it. Though her body was increasingly confined to the infirmary, her soul expanded. Sisters came to her for quiet counsel, not because she was famous, but because she had become trustworthy. She listened more than she spoke. She prayed more than she taught. In her silence, many heard the voice of God more clearly. Her hidden glory was this: she allowed herself to be small. In doing so, she became great. Like the Blessed Virgin, whose message she once carried, Bernadette magnified the Lord not by speaking much, but by saying yes and letting God do the rest in secret, in silence, and in love. Chapter 9. The Work of Suffering. Life in the convent of Nevers brought Bernadette the obscurity she had longed for, but not peace from pain. Her fragile health, already weakened by childhood illness, began to deteriorate rapidly. Chronic asthma returned with relentless force. She developed tuberculosis in her lungs and a painful tumor in her right knee, likely bone cancer. Every step, every breath became an act of endurance. Yet Bernadette bore it all with quiet dignity, never asking for pity or relief. The sisters often offered to take her to Lourdes to bathe in the miraculous waters that had healed so many, but Bernadette gently refused. "The water is not for me," she said simply. "It is for others." She believed with all her heart in the grace that flowed from the grotto, but she knew her path was different. While others came to Lourdes seeking healing, Bernadette had been chosen to suffer not as punishment, but as participation. Her tiny infirmary room became her mission field. There, in silence and sickness, she lived out what she once received in vision: total surrender. She could no longer work in the infirmary or assist the sick. Her strength failed her, but she continued to offer her suffering for the salvation of souls. "My job," she said with a weak smile, is to be ill. These words, spoken without bitterness, revealed a soul refined in the fire of grace. Even in her worst moments, Bernadette never lost her gentle humor. When one sister found her weeping during a severe attack of pain and asked, "Are you suffering too much?" Bernadette replied, "Not too much to bear, with God." She would often press a small crucifix to her lips, whispering prayers no one else could hear. Her identification with Christ crucified became the center of her spirituality, not theoretical, but real, lived out in every gasp, every tear. Visitors who came to see her were struck by the peace that radiated from her face, even when her body trembled with pain. One nurse witnessed a moment during a painful treatment performed without anesthesia, where Bernadette clutched her crucifix and cried silently, but did not let out a single scream. Her suffering was intense, yet deeply interior, wrapped in prayer and love. She had become a living altar, offering herself fully to God. Her love for the Eucharist only grew stronger during these final years. Even when she could not attend Mass, she would ask to have the Blessed Sacrament brought to her bedside. Holy Communion became her strength, her joy, her anchor. And beside her always was a small statue of the Lady of Lourdes, a quiet reminder of the vision that had forever changed her path and now gave meaning to her pain. In her suffering, Bernadette discovered her true vocation, not in the memory of visions past, but in the living reality of the cross. She had once been the chosen witness of the Virgin's smile, but now she became the companion of Christ's agony. The grotto had been her calling, but the crucifix pressed to her chest was now her lifelong mission. Chapter 10. The Death of a Saint. By early 1879, Sister Marie Bernard's body had become a chalice of suffering. Tuberculosis had spread through her lungs, leaving her breathless and weak. The tumor in her knee caused constant agony. Her bones ached, her skin was thin, and even speaking became a struggle. Yet her soul remained luminous. "I am ground like a grain of wheat," she once said, "but it is for love." Lent had begun, and so had her final offering. Her room in the infirmary had become her cloister, her chapel, her Calvary. She could no longer walk, barely lift her head, but her eyes still held the quiet peace of someone who knew the suffering was not in vain. She clutched her crucifix tightly, as if drawing strength from every nail and thorn. Those who visited her in those days described a silence that felt holy, as if heaven had already begun to surround her. On the 16th of April, 1879, Bernadette sensed that her time had come. That morning, she asked for the last rites. The sisters gathered around her bed, and she received the anointing of the sick with full awareness. Despite her weakness, she answered every prayer aloud, her voice soft but steady. When the Eucharist was brought to her, she whispered, "My God, I love you with all my heart." She then turned to the sisters and said, "Pray for me, a poor sinner." Her final words were not grand, but childlike, a prayer to the one who had once appeared to her in the grotto of Massabielle. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for me, poor sinner." With that, she kissed her crucifix one last time, closed her eyes, and entered a silent agony. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the hour of Christ's death, she quietly breathed her last. She was 35 years old. News of her passing spread quickly. In Nevers, the sisters mourned her like family. In Lourdes, candles were lit and prayers whispered at the grotto. Her body was laid in the convent chapel for viewing, and those who saw her said, "She looked peaceful, more beautiful in death than in life." One sister remarked, "It was as if heaven had reached down and kissed her." Bernadette was buried in a simple grave on the convent grounds, but her story did not end there. In 1909, 30 years later, her body was exhumed as part of the beatification process. To everyone's astonishment, It was found to be incorrupt, free of decay, untouched by time. It happened again in 1919 and once more in 1925. Each time, the same. A body preserved, a mystery confirmed. The world had doubted her, her visions, her silence, her suffering, but in death, heaven left no doubt. The incorrupt body of Bernadette became a final witness that holiness does not fade, that purity endures, and that God lifts up the lowly not only in life, but beyond the grave. Chapter 11. Canonization and Legacy. On the 8th of December, 1933, the feast of the Immaculate Conception, Pope Pius XI formally declared Bernadette Soubirous a saint of the Catholic Church. The proclamation echoed across the world, from the marble halls of the Vatican to the quiet grotto in Lourdes, where a poor girl once knelt. The Church, after years of careful investigation, had placed its seal of truth on what heaven had already revealed, that God had chosen the lowly to carry his message. The canonization was not just a recognition of Bernadette's visions, but of her life, a life marked by humility, silence, suffering, and deep faith. She had never preached a sermon, never written a book, never led a movement. She had simply said, yes, once at the grotto, and every day after, in the hidden corners of convent life. In that yes, the Church saw not only the witness of a visionary, but the soul of a saint. Meanwhile, Lourdes had grown from a small village into one of the most visited pilgrimage sites in the world. Millions of people from every continent traveled to the sanctuary each year. Some came out of desperation, seeking healing. Others came in thanksgiving. Many came simply to pray, but all came with hope, drawn by a presence that could not be explained, only experienced. The grotto of Massabielle, once a forgotten crevice in a rocky hillside, was now crowned with a great basilica. The spring that Bernadette uncovered still flowed, clear and cold. The water, blessed by countless miracles, was collected in bottles, used in hospitals, and carried to the sick across the world. Yet the greatest miracles were often invisible healings of the heart, conversions of the soul, silent renewals of faith. Bernadette's legacy lived not only in Lourdes, but in the hearts of the poor, the sick, and the hidden. Her life became a witness that holiness is not found in greatness, but in fidelity. She became a companion to all who suffer in silence, reminding them that God sees what the world ignores and treasures what it forgets. In Nevers, her incorrupt body rests in a glass reliquary, surrounded by pilgrims who come not to admire, but to learn. Her face, serene and peaceful, still speaks of surrender. Her hands, clasped in prayer, still point to heaven. No longer the shy girl of Lourdes, she had become one of the Church's most beloved saints, not by doing much, but by giving everything. Saint Bernadette once said, "I was not chosen because I was the best. I was chosen because I was the poorest and the most ignorant." In those words lies the secret of her greatness. She did not make herself holy, she allowed God to do it. And in that surrender, she became a living echo of the Virgin's song. He has looked upon his servant in her lowliness. Chapter 12. Prayer to Saint Bernadette Soubirous. The story of Saint Bernadette is not a tale of dramatic achievements or public victories. It is the quiet triumph of a soul who chose to say yes not once, but daily, in silence and obscurity. She reminds us that holiness is not reserved for the powerful or the educated, but for those who trust God more than themselves. In her poverty, God found richness. In her weakness, he revealed strength. And in her humility, he made his glory known. Bernadette was never healed of her sickness. She was never lifted from her suffering, but she was transformed not by what she saw, but by how she surrendered. Her greatness was not in visions, but in the way she lived after the visions were gone. Through her, we are taught that to follow Christ is not always to be exalted, but often to be emptied, so that he may fill us entirely. In our own lives, where pain, confusion, or insignificance may seem to weigh heavy, Bernadette stands beside us as a sister who understands. Let us turn to her now, not as one who dazzled the world, but as one who quietly opened her heart to heaven and was never the same. Prayer to Saint Bernadette. O Saint Bernadette, child of silence, daughter of grace, you who were chosen to see the Immaculate Virgin, not because you were strong, but because you were small, teach us to welcome the will of God with the same trust. You who saw the spring gush from the rock, help us to believe that grace can flow, even from the dry and forgotten places in our lives. You who suffered in silence, with joy and without complaint, be near to those who carry hidden pain, to the sick who wait, the poor who endure, the souls who pray without answers. Intercede for us when faith feels hard, when God seems distant, when the world praises pride and we are asked to choose humility. May we, like you, never seek to be remembered, but to remember him, never to be seen but to see his face in all things. And when our earthly pilgrimage draws to its close, may your gentle prayer become ours. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for me, a poor sinner. Saint Bernadette Soubirous, guide us to the spring, lead us to the grotto, and show us that even the smallest soul can become a vessel of heaven. Amen.